Have you ever noticed how the wisest, most conscious people seem to disappear? They don't shout on social media. They don't chase likes. They don't crave applause. They simply fade away. And paradoxically, it's in that silence that they become more present than ever. We live in an age of noise, digital noise, mental noise, emotional noise. Everyone wants to be seen, validated, recognized. But those who truly find themselves, who touch the essence of life, discover something unsettling. The more you awaken, the less you need to prove you're awake. Socrates said, "Know thyself, and you will know the universe." But what he didn't say is that self-knowledge comes at a cost: social detachment. Those who awaken spiritually lose interest in masks, competition, and the illusion of persona. The ego resists, fights, begs for a stage. But the true self smiles and withdraws. And it's in that silence, that space between noise and presence, where inner freedom lives. Modern society calls it escape. But what if it's the opposite? What if disappearing is the only way to truly exist? Get ready. What you're about to discover may completely change how you see silence, presence, and the very meaning of being alive. Spiritual awakening is perhaps the greatest of human paradoxes. Everyone seeks it, but few recognize it when it arrives. Most expect lights, angels, revelations, but true awakening makes no sound. It silences. It doesn't come with fireworks, but with a sigh. It's as if a curtain opens within, and suddenly everything makes sense. Yet that meaning no longer fits into words. It simply is. Ignorance, Socrates said, begins when we confuse knowledge with appearance. Today, we confuse awareness with visibility. We seek external validation, collect followers, measure worth by recognition. Modern society has turned the ego into a god and silence into a crime. But those who awaken see the theater and realize that the masks of persona, success, and comparison are pure illusion. The result is confusion. When someone begins to awaken, they feel out of place. It's the discomfort of realizing that the game of life no longer attracts. Conversations lose meaning, competitions seem childish, and loneliness, once feared, becomes an old friend. The ego mourns the disappearance, but the soul smiles for the liberation. If Socrates lived today, he might ask, "Why are you running so fast if you still don't know who you are?" And that question echoes, because awakening isn't about gaining more, it's about letting go. It's material and social detachment, the abandonment of comparisons and the need to prove worth. It's simplicity in its most radical form, being what you are, even when no one sees. The philosophical solution, then, isn't to fight the system, but to transcend its logic. It's choosing presence over performance, silence over noise, truth over vanity. Spiritual awakening is like a sunset. Those who try to hold it, lose it. Those who simply contemplate it, live it. And in the end, we discover that the true paradox is this: the more awakened we become, the less we need to prove that we are. Consciousness replaces recognition, inner peace replaces applause, and detachment turns into freedom. And you? Have you ever felt that moment when the world seems the same, but something inside you changes completely? Share in the comments. Maybe your awakening has already begun. We live imprisoned, not by iron bars, but by invisible concepts. Modern society built a temple to the ego and called it reality. We chase goals we didn't choose, pursue dreams that aren't ours, and believe that external validation equals worth. It's the subtlest illusion that being depends on someone else's gaze. Ignorance begins when we confuse movement with progress. We run, produce, post, but we are rarely present. Socrates would say, the greatest of all errors is to believe we know what we have not yet questioned. No, and when was the last time you questioned what you call success? Is applause truly a sign of fulfillment, or just a disguise for the absence of self? The consequences of this illusion are silent but devastating. The mind lives in constant noise. Comparison breeds resentment, resentment turns into suffering, and suffering fuels the cycle of pain. People lose themselves in roles, persona, mask, ego, and forget their essential self. Addicted to digital dopamine, they numb the soul with distractions, believing they are alive while merely repeating themselves. Lao Tzu said, "He who controls others is strong, but he who controls himself is powerful." The path to liberation, therefore, is the path back to silence, to introspection, to the stillness that reconnects us with awareness. Meditation, observing thoughts, witnessing without judgment. All of this dissolves the illusion of separation between self and the whole. When consciousness awakens, it sees the game and smiles. It realizes there's no real victory in a game invented by the ego. The true reward is inner freedom, the serenity that comes when there's no longer any need to prove anything. It's material and social detachment, the abandonment of competition, the blossoming of silent authenticity. Philosophy teaches us that wisdom isn't about accumulating answers, but emptying the excess of beliefs. Silence becomes a mirror, and in that reflection we see our true nature. Simple, calm, real. What remains after all illusions fall away? Only what has always been there, the essence of life. And you? Have you ever asked yourself what remains when all that is false dissolves? Comment, what does freedom mean to you? Imagine a crystal clear lake. The water is so still it reflects the sky perfectly. Now throw a stone. The reflection breaks. The image distorts. That's the human mind. The more agitated it is, the less it reflects truth. And that's why spiritually awakened people choose silence. They understand that to see the real, one must disappear from the noise. Modern ignorance is believing that only what is seen exists. We confuse presence with visibility, impact with noise, but true presence doesn't need to be announced. It manifests in stillness, in a simple gesture, in an attentive gaze. It's a subtle energy, almost invisible, yet deeply transformative. Lao Tzu said, "He who knows does not speak, he who speaks does not know." And Socrates would add, "Silence is the language of wisdom." The consequence of this inversion is the existential emptiness consuming modern society. We are surrounded by voices yet starving for meaning. Our feeds scream, our minds race, but our souls fall silent. We seek to be seen because we've forgotten how to see. We want to be remembered because we've forgotten how to exist. And in that forgetting, the true self fades, buried beneath layers of persona and ego. But awakening is a return to presence. It's the moment when the observer within us, the witness, awakens. Suddenly, you realize you are not your thoughts, but the one who observes them. You are not your emotions, but the one who feels them. And in that instant, something shifts. Noise loses power, silence gains weight. It's consciousness coming home. When the awakened disappear, it's not escape, it's fusion. They become part of the whole like the wind, unseen but felt. Their absence is pure presence. They walk the world without needing to be noticed to transform it. And whoever crosses their path feels something, a calm, an inner peace, a reminder of what we've forgotten to be. The paradox is that by disappearing, they become omnipresent. Their influence doesn't come from words, but from energy. They don't teach through speeches, but through silence itself. They remind us, by their very existence, that the essence of life needs no stage, only presence. And you, have you ever met someone whose mere presence brought you peace, even without a single word? Comment, what does true presence mean to you? Close your eyes for a moment. What do you hear? Maybe the distant sound of traffic, the hum of a device, the echo of your own thoughts. But what about the silence between those sounds? Do you notice it? It's curious how, in the rush of modern life, we forget that silence isn't the absence of sound, but the total presence of being. Collective ignorance is born when we mistake noise for vitality. We live connected to everything except ourselves. With every notification, a fragment of attention is lost. With every comparison, a piece of the self dissolves. Modern society idolizes noise, the noise of opinions, success, haste, and masks. But silence is subversive. It dismantles the theater of persona, disarms the ego, and reveals what lies behind every illusion. The consequences are visible: chronic anxiety, insomnia, emotional exhaustion, a constant feeling of insufficiency. We seek peace in meditation apps, yet still with headphones on. We crave tranquility, but fear stillness, because silence confronts. It forces us to face what we avoid: fear, emptiness, loneliness. But that's exactly where transformation lives. As Seneca said, silence is the refuge of wisdom. When we surrender to true silence, not the imposed kind, but the chosen one, something inside us reconfigures. The mind slows down, consciousness expands, and a new form of listening emerges. Listening without judgment, observing without trying to control. It's the beginning of real self-knowledge, the kind born from calm observation and full acceptance of what is. Silence is also a teacher. It teaches without words. It dissolves the ego and awakens humility, reminding us that we are not the center of the universe, but part of it. In stillness, the soul breathes, wisdom blooms, and the essence of life reveals itself like a soft melody that has always been playing. We just hadn't heard it. It is in this space of inner serenity that we discover fullness, not the noisy fullness of achievement, but the quiet fullness of presence. There, peace is not something to be reached, but something that has always been there, hidden beneath the noise of the mind. And you? Have you ever experienced that moment when everything stops, time suspends, and for a second you simply are? Comment. What has silence taught you about yourself? There is a force that cannot be seen, but can be felt. It lives in the calm of someone who doesn't react, in the eyes of one who understands without judging, in the presence of someone who doesn't need to speak to transform. That is the true invisible influence, the one born from consciousness, not from the need to be noticed. Human ignorance is believing that only the visible has power, but Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Nay, and to live without examining is to live without perceiving what is unseen, the subtle energies, the silence between words, the impact of intentions. Modern society, obsessed with performance, has lost the sense of the invisible. But those who awaken spiritually rediscover this silent power, the power of authentic presence. What we see today is the collapse of noise, exhausted people trying to prove themselves, voices overlapping in search of attention. And amid this chaos emerges the one who doesn't compete, and their calm unsettles the system, because silence is revolutionary. It breaks the cycle of illusion and reminds us that true power is internal. He who masters himself is more powerful than he who commands an army, said Aristotle. The consequence of unconsciousness is exhaustion. We live tired because we confuse movement with purpose. And here is where the climax happens, the point at which the soul, exhausted, screams in silence, "What if everything I believe is just an illusion? What if I've never truly known myself? What if what I call I is only a mask, a persona created to please?" It's the moment when the mirror shatters, and for the first time we look beyond the surface. The mask falls. The persona dissolves. What remains is the witness, pure consciousness, that silent point within us that observes everything but clings to nothing. It is the birth of spiritual freedom, the liberation from the game of approval and emotional dependence. The philosophical solution: detach from the need for impact, leave the stage and trust in the strength of silent authenticity. Because those who live in inner alignment don't need to prove anything. Their very vibration changes the atmosphere. It's like a fire in the night. It makes no noise, but everyone feels it. That is the essence of wisdom, transforming the world without trying to control it. So, let me ask you, do you want to keep being just another voice in the noise, or become the silence that changes everything? Comment. What does it mean to you to have an invisible influence? We live in an era where silence is subversive. Stillness in this noisy world is an act of rebellion. After all, the system needs noise to survive. It depends on haste, comparison, and constant dissatisfaction. Without the noise of distractions, the illusion collapses. And that's why spiritually awakened people are, unknowingly, the true revolutionaries of our time. Collective ignorance believes that changing the world means shouting louder. But history proves the opposite. The deepest transformations were born from silence. Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu, they all walked in quietness. They didn't seek crowds, but they found hearts. Their silence echoed louder than any speech, because truth doesn't need a megaphone, it needs presence. The consequences of the absence of stillness are everywhere. Just look at people's faces. Anxiety, anguish, and emptiness no achievement can fill. We live in a cycle of self-imposed suffering, a theater where everyone tries to prove they're happier than the rest. And ironically, the more we chase recognition, the further we drift from authenticity. Modern society doesn't fear noise, it fears silence, because silence reveals what it tries to hide: existential emptiness. But when consciousness awakens, something changes. A person realizes that the true revolution isn't external, it's internal. Serenity becomes resistance. Tranquility becomes protest. Stillness is the purest cry of a free soul. Socrates called this virtue, the power to act according to reason, not emotion. And in that state, the individual becomes unshakable, a rock in the current. The philosophical solution lies in living lightly, to take part in society without being consumed by it, to act without attachment to results, as the Tao teaches. He who tries to control the world loses it. He who lets it flow possesses it. That is the fluidity of wisdom. To live in the world, but not be of it. To be simple without being naive. To be present without needing to appear. That is rebellion through stillness, defying the system simply by existing in peace. And as paradoxical as it seems, this form of resistance is the most powerful, because nothing destabilizes chaos more than a serene soul. Nothing threatens fear more than someone who has found inner freedom. Silence is the antidote to collective madness, and balance, the true revolution. And you, can you imagine the power you'd have if you chose silence over reaction, calm over haste, peace over control? Comment. What does a silent rebellion mean to you? There comes a moment on the spiritual path when everything you thought you needed begins to lose meaning. Applause sounds empty, achievements lose their shine, and what once was a goal now feels like a burden. This is the beginning of disappearance, not of the body, but of the ego. It's not dying, it's awakening. Human ignorance believes that to exist is to be noticed. From an early age, we're conditioned to seek recognition in school, online, at work. But the more we depend on others' eyes, the further we move from ourselves. The result is a kind of invisible suffering, loneliness even in a crowd. We spend our lives trying to be someone, while forgetting to be ourselves. Socrates would say, the wise man does not seek to be admired, he seeks to be true. And in this pursuit of truth, the individual begins to dissolve. The persona, that mask we wear to please, falls away. The social self disappears. And what remains is being, naked and free. This disappearance is not escape, it is liberation. It is the soul returning to its point of origin, silence. Lao Tzu taught that he who knows contentment is rich. Disappearance is the most radical form of contentment. To stop running, stop proving, stop explaining. It's the moment when a person understands they don't need to be seen to exist. Spiritual freedom happens when we stop seeking meaning in others' eyes and find fullness within ourselves. The power to disappear is the power to choose reality over illusion, to abandon the game of appearances and enter the state of presence. It is social detachment that reveals the deepest self-knowledge. Those who disappear from the noise do not become less, they become more real, more calm, more whole. It is the reunion with one's own essence, the one that needs no name, title, or likes. And the most beautiful part is that this disappearance is also a form of love, because when you stop competing, you allow others to shine. When you stop shouting, you make room for silence to speak. And in that space, the world transforms, not through force, but through presence. So perhaps the true purpose of life is not to be remembered, but to remember. To remember who you were before the world told you who you should be. And to disappear in this sense is simply to come home. And have you ever felt the urge to simply vanish? Not out of giving up, but out of clarity. Comment, what does disappearance mean to you? There is a silent wisdom in learning to live without needing to be seen. While the world rushes in pursuit of visibility, some simply choose to be. It's not giving up, it's maturity. It's understanding that life is not measured by eyes turned toward us, but by eyes opened within us. Voluntary invisibility is the rarest and most complete form of freedom. Ignorance believes that happiness lies in being remembered. But being remembered is not the same as being real. How many live for the image and forget the essence? Modern society sells fame as fulfillment, but delivers exhaustion. The constant pursuit of approval is a golden prison. And the more we try to maintain the shine, the more we lose our inner light. Socrates would ask, do you want to appear good or be good? That's the question that separates the awakened from the distracted. The awakened choose presence, simplicity, silence. They understand that the value of life lies in direct experience, not in others' opinions. Silent authenticity is their form of rebellion. They don't reject society. They simply no longer need it to feel alive. The consequence of this choice is paradoxical. The invisible begins to radiate. Those who live in peace vibrate. Those who live consciously inspire. Without trying, they become examples, not through words, but through energy. It's the same force we feel when we see someone serene amid chaos. That kind of presence is like a melody only the soul can hear. It is pure harmony. To live invisibly yet fully is to dance with the world without needing a stage. It's to play the game of life lightly, knowing that it's only that, a game. You still love, laugh, work, fail, learn, but without losing yourself in roles. You observe your thoughts without being dragged by them. You accept your emotional scars without judgment. And you understand that nothing needs to be perfect. It just needs to be true. In the end, the invisible does not vanish. It dissolves into the whole. It is the state of union that ancient traditions call tattvamasi, thou art that. When there is no longer separation between the self and life, being merges with reality. And in that fusion, there is no more seeking, no fear, no loneliness. There is only the inner serenity of one who has finally understood presence is enough. And you? Have you ever imagined what it would be like to live this way, invisible yet whole? Comment. What does it mean to you to live fully without needing to be seen? At the end of every search, there is always a return, not a physical return, but a return of consciousness, a reconnection with the point from which we came, the silence we avoided, the presence we ignored, the detachment we feared. All of it was guiding us home. And that home is not a place, it's a state of being. An inner space where peace stops being a goal and becomes our nature. The ignorance of modern man lies in believing he must conquer what already belongs to him. He chases love, success, validation, when everything he seeks already lives within. But trapped in the illusion of separation, he forgets that true spiritual awakening adds nothing. It removes. It removes masks, fears, comparisons. It is the simplicity that remains when the mind's complexity grows silent. The consequences of ignoring this truth are everywhere. Collective anxiety, loss of purpose, identity crises. We live disconnected from the real because we've forgotten how to feel the wind, the time, the breath, the now. Life has been reduced to performance, and performance is the slow death of the soul. But self-knowledge is the antidote. It reminds us that the essence of life doesn't need to be productive to be valuable. Socrates would say, "It is not by living long, but by living well that one attains happiness." And to live well is to live with awareness, not moral awareness, but awakened consciousness. It is to perceive yourself perceiving. It is to know that every thought is just a visitor, and that the true self is the one who welcomes it without becoming it. It is the balance between acting in the world and not getting lost in it. These are the lessons of those who disappeared, that silence heals, that detachment frees, that authenticity enlightens, and that true spiritual freedom is not doing whatever you want, but not being a slave to wanting. They teach us that the greatest act of courage is to be simple in a world that demands spectacle. Perhaps the final message is this: you don't need to disappear from the world. You only need to disappear from what separates you from yourself. The rest is consequence. Serenity comes when we stop fighting life and start dancing with it. And in that rhythm, we discover something no success can give: silent fullness. And you? What have you learned so far about silence, detachment, and self-knowledge? Comment. What does it mean to you to live within a freedom? Perhaps the greatest mystery of life is not discovering something new, but remembering what we have always known. Wisdom, in the end, is simply the soul's memory. And that's why spiritually awakened people disappear, because when we find what is essential, we realize the rest is noise. Silence, detachment, and presence are not virtues of hermits. They are tools of spiritual survival. In an era where everyone shouts, staying silent is an act of courage. In a culture of masks, being authentic is a revolution. And in a world of haste, living calmly is resistance. Socrates taught us that the examined life is the only one worth living. To examine in this context is not to judge, it is to observe. It is learning to witness the flow of life without being carried away by it. When we do this, consciousness expands, the ego quiets, and the true self emerges. Liberation does not come from control, but from surrender. Peace does not come from escape, but from acceptance. And perhaps that is awakening, realizing there is nothing to achieve. That the sacred is in the simple, the divine is in the now, and enlightenment is not an arrival, it is a way of walking. Spiritually awakened people have not disappeared from the world, they have simply stopped fighting against it. They live invisibly yet fully, and that's why, paradoxically, they are more alive than ever. So, before you run to the next noise, try the opposite. Stop, breathe, feel the silence watching you back. There, between one thought and another, lives everything you've ever been searching for: truth, peace, freedom, you. If this reflection resonated with you, comment below, "I choose silence." And if you wish to keep walking with me through this universe of philosophy, self-knowledge, and consciousness, subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to remember what it means to be. Because the next step may reveal something even deeper, not how to disappear from the world, but how to reappear in your own soul.